Hello guys, just Goron here and welcome back to the 4th episode of building Beekse Bergen here in Planet Zoo. And in this episode, as I said in the last one, we are making a start on some more pathing, some more terrain stuff, and the wild dogs, hyenas, cheetah habitat area. They're all pretty close together. And as you might be able to tell from the title of this video, I'm not sure how I'm going to call it yet, but this is the episode in which something has to be compromised, something has to be rearward, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So over here I'm doing a bunch of figuring out how the terrain and elevations and pathing around this little intersection works. And it's quite tough to determine that from like the 5 pictures I made. So next time I'm there, I'm gonna be just recording, walking along this path, making 360 panorama photos. That's definitely something I've learned, because the few places I have those panorama photos of are incredibly useful, or those photos are incredibly useful, and I can use them to determine how things are in relation to one another. But if I just have a picture of a fence with a little glass window, it's super difficult to figure that stuff out. Now you can see I've placed some wooden structures here and there. Put those down via the grid on Google Maps that I have, and that's basically my starting point, is these landmarks that I can really see on Google Maps, and that I can tell where they should be, and then I can start working from there. So you can see me place on a slightly thinner path. There's a 3-meter path leading up to this box, a viewing box for the wild dogs exhibit, and the other one, there's a little wooden box next to the hyena exhibit. And here I'm trying to figure out how to do, I've done it earlier in the park, like a little sliver of staff path that people won't walk across. I end up removing it because it's not working here, but in after the episode I did some off-camera work while rendering videos, and I did manage it to work. I did manage to get it to work, I think. Speaking of off-camera work, actually before the start of this time-lapse, there's also about 2 hours of reworking the entrance I did to be a bit more accurate to the grid, as well as just some minor detailing and fixing around the park. Now here you can see the little glass wall I mentioned. I mean, that one is possible to figure out, because I could see the other viewing box in the background of the picture. Now here's some temporary stuff. I've chosen to do the black concrete or the black asphalt, use that as temporary pathing, so I know if it's temporary or not. Now here's something funny. I didn't know that we had hyenas in this game. I thought all we had was wild dogs. So I was thinking that I was going to have to just put wild dogs in every hyena exhibit, of which there are 2. This is the first. The second one's further back in the park. But then I looked around and was like, oh crap, there are actually hyenas. Okay, we can put those in. And they hate it. They absolutely hate this little area. It is far too small. And of course, in the 2 episodes ago I said, oh yeah, let's turn off animal welfare, or let's turn animal welfare back on rather, and we'll have it as an extra challenge. Well, a challenge it was, because I must have spent well, not hours, but I sure spent a while trying to alter this slightly to make it not good. There's still add them to the orange field so we don't get protesters and stuff. So and here again I'm kind of figuring out how the elevation work based on the couple of pictures. I have somewhat decent panorama picture of this exhibit taken from that viewing platform. So here I was able to kind of determine especially the look of the habitat, but elevation wise I'm still a bit in the blue. I feel like the path goes up alongside this exhibit, but I can't tell for sure. Up alongside this exhibit, but I can't tell for sure. But yeah, now I'm just doing a bunch of terraforming to match the habitat with the real life counterpart, put the fencing right, and here we do a bunch of adjusting, partially to get the shape right, partially to get the size just a bit up, because size is detrimental to animal welfare. If everything is in the green but size isn't, they're gonna be miserable. So I just have to get size up slightly, so much more to get the animals to a point where they are fine with the area they're in. Now you can see me put down a bunch of lighter, not soil, but sand, because there was way too much soil for their liking. So I tried to mix it up a bit using some sand to get those walking paths in that you see in a lot of mammal habitats. Now I'm just expanding this thing a bit more. I'm not sure how accurate it is. It's not really an area you can reach as a customer, as a visitor to the park. So I'm just kind of working out a thing that looks kind of like the reference image, but also has the space requirements. Well, not really, it doesn't have the space requirements, but it gets closer to it, I guess. So yeah, that's what is that all about. Now, here's something fun that I was doing as well, because one of the reasons the space requirement was so far off was because they didn't have any hard shelter. So what I'm doing over here is hiding some green plaster pieces in this big tree, and you really can't tell they're in there. And I first tried some glass, but it was too reflective. You could tell that there was a glass piece in the tree when the sun was shining on it. So I instead chose for plaster, because the art pieces are plastic, so they would also be kind of reflective, but the plaster is kind of matte. So I decided to use that. Now, the trick I used to determine where I should put it was I put the tree high up in the air and I let it snow, so I could see where the snow was falling on the ground. So that's roughly where the leaves are. So as long as there was no snow on the plaster pieces, I knew they would be inside the tree, and I could kind of put them down. Of course, you could also just put a whole bunch of them in the tree, but you don't really know where the overlap is, and I didn't want to put too many pieces in. So yeah, so here we're building the viewing platform for the hyenas, and there's only one small detail missing, which I'm actually also missing in the lion habitat as well, and it's like a little net overhanging the exhibit, so that if you drop something or you fall off the railing, you get caught in the net and you don't fall into the exhibit. So that's something I should add in the future, both here and in the lion's exhibit, and possibly other places as well. I'm not sure how many more. But here you can see tiny planks fitting all over the border, and that is that pretty much done. Now we're altering the height of some of them to give it a bit more of an interesting look, and that is the hyena habitat, or exhibit. It is a habitat, right? I keep getting the two mixed up every time. I feel like it's technically the same, but the game makes a differentiation just for the game aspect. But that is the hyenas pretty much done. We do some small alterations still, but just, yeah, here you can see just me trying to get that size up ever so slightly, and then once I got it to a good point, I ruin it by detailing and putting these trees in, and suddenly they hate it again. Because the trees, of course, take away a lot of their walkable space. So suddenly they are not so happy anymore. So I have to add that space in some way. So I make the habitat a bit larger on that side. And at this point, I kind of got stuck. I didn't know what to do with the cheetah habitat or the wild dogs, because I simply didn't have enough reference. So as I said, videos, 360 panorama camera images will do the trick to help me get that stuff down. So that is for next time I visit the zoo, sometime this week actually, so that should be fine. I think I'm going next Thursday. So that should be all good. Now here we are. Since I can't continue on that stuff, I thought, oh well, I'll just continue on this river water. It's kind of a lake actually, because it's not connected to anything. It's just a standalone body of water. And what I did was, oh yeah, you keep checking me on, like, it keeps saying, oh, animals are boxed. Apparently when I add or remove water to this entire volume, it boxes every animal in the park. So eventually I get sick of that and I just play on polls. But what I do is that I add, like, you could see me add a lake in the big grass field. That is all a point of, like, giving me more pieces of reference so that I can kind of compare to the grid and see where we're at. So I make a bunch of mistakes and I can fix them easily because I can compare it to those reference points. So here we are moving along the river. I'm just gonna call it a river, I don't care. And this is where there's a problem. Because silly old me decided when planning out the park that it was more important to have an exact 1 to 1.5 meter grid. I decided that was more important than fitting the entire park into that grid. So, and then stupid me also thought that it was more important to have part of the parking lot than part of the park. I am punching myself over this now, because a small bit of the park falls out of the grid, and it's basically, if I had one grid piece more, aka remove one grid piece from the parking lot, I would be fine-ish. Like, I would still have to make up some creative choices to add, like, the road of the car safari going through. And you can see me compare it to the path a bunch, and that's the piece of grid we're missing. So I would still need to find a way to get the car safari path into the grid, but it would be a lot easier. But now I have to make up for a bunch of space, because basically there's a penguin habitat that is currently outside of the grid, and there's a bunch of this little island we're cutting out now is where they hold the bird of prey show, and next to the path we just placed are actually a bunch of I want to say storage units, but that sounds kind of inhumane to the birds, but it's where they store the birds, where they keep the birds that are part of the show. So now we only have one grid to contain a lake, the storage of the bird of prey show birds, and a road, which are supposed to be basically 3 pieces of grid, but they're all outside, so we have to kind of just yank them in. And since like half of the park is already built, I don't really feel like redoing all of that, especially since, like, before recording this I spent 2 hours just redoing the pathing of the entrance alone, pretty much. So yeah, not happening. So I decided to keep the entire scale of the park the same, except for this tiny bit where the bird of prey show, penguin exhibit, road, and lemur exhibit are. So that part is going to be kind of scaled even further down. Probably the lemur exhibit especially is going to be scaled even further down, just to make space for this error. And the lesson we learned here, which you can take home from this is an educative channel now, the lesson you can take home is plan out, like, at the start of your project, plan. Mistakes you make early on can have detrimental consequences to your process later on. So in this case, because I made a very small lapse in judgment, you could say. Early on in the process, we got screwed in the end. So anyway, that's the end of the time lapse. We didn't do much this episode, just got some terraforming done, but here's some screenshot of the hyena exhibit to compare. In the next episode, we will probably be working on some pathing, and in an episode after that we'll get back to this area, because by then I should have visited the zoo again. Anyway, that's it. Thanks. Bye. I usually do the outro during the screenshots, but this time I had so much to talk about, I ran out of time. So I'm gonna have to end it off. Goodbye. It's a black screen. I'm scared. Darkness. Goodbye again.